Guys, I'm BW. I have won 3 majors in CSGO, and this is Thorin's YouTube channel.
The Legends spot in CSGO is where a team finishes top 8 at one of the majors, and therefore automatically they qualify for the next major and will finish at a very minimum top 16, since in the current major format, with the former qualifier is now the first week of the major, the new challenger stage, they now skip that and will be waiting in the new Legends stage, as it's now referred to. Now, ownership of this particular spot, which is transferred from one major qualifying to another, by Valve decree since the early days of the CSGO majors, has been owned by the players that earned that particular finish, top 8, at one of the majors. But with the caveat that they must retain 3 of the starting 5 members of the lineup which earned that spot. So they can't just have one player say, well, it's my spot and I'm going here with it, or another one say, the majority of the starting lineup has to stay together, but they can move team. They can go to any other organization they want. They can go to their main rival. They can go to a different team that finished top 8 and they take their spot, and that team, in theory, could take 3 of their players and go to a different squad. Now, one thing you can't do currently is you can't mix and match Legend spot ownership from different teams. So, for example, in the last major top 8, let's go with, there were many, many teams. So one of the matchups was FaZe versus Mouse Sports. Now, Mouse Sports, if for some reason they'd lost a bunch of their players, couldn't say, right, well, we've still got Chris J and Oscar, so if we can get one player who was in FaZe to come and play for us, then we got 3 out of 8, 3 out of 5, and we all finished top 8, so we still got an ownership spot. No, that aspect doesn't exist. Now then, in a world in which so much in esports is owned and controlled by everyone but the players, so on the level we're talking about now, by the organizations, the teams that these players, these lineups play for, I can see why Valve thought it was more of an egalitarian system, less open to abuse, to implement this approach, where it's the players that own the slot, and therefore it's on the orgs to be incentivized to work with the players to retain those players and have a slot at the next major. But the main reason for that is, obviously, if you think the other way around, if the org owned the spot, but the players didn't own it, then the org could kick the players, but keep the spot. They could even field an inferior team at the major, which would be worse for everyone. They could field an entirely different team, so they could get a team that's in the top 8 and have a legend spot, and then they could say to one of the best teams in the world, you know, I've already got actually a legend spot waiting for you. I know your team, so think about PGL Krakow, where FaZe Clan, second best team in the world, failed the major. They didn't have a major spot going to the next one. Imagine some org who fluked the top 8, Immortals would be a great example, could go to FaZe and say, hey, come and sign with my org, I'll buy you out everything, and I've got a spot for you already, so you can automatically skip further ahead in the next tournament. You won't have to go through the qualifier, as they then did, and you know what, in this scenario, my players who were in Immortals before, fuck them, they lose, they don't want to stay in my team, they disrespect me, they don't have a spot anymore. You can see how obviously organization abuse could be an issue here. There's also the fact that organizations could even hold the current players hostage. They could say to them, oh, your contract ended after the last major. Well, you know what? I want to re-sign you to a new contract. But if you leave, you lose the major spot, and you want that major spot, do you? And, you know, you're going to get sticker money if you have the major spot. So sign the contracts again. Be a good boy, but I'm not going to offer you as much money. Or, you know what? I'm not going to offer you as good an offer as this other organization that wants to sign you to have you play for them instead. So I'm actually going to use this as my bargaining chip to bargain you down to have to take less to play at the major, guaranteed, because everyone knows in history not having that automatic spot is very dangerous. There have been very good teams who didn't get out of the minor, who didn't even get to the minor from offline qualifier. And obviously, when we used to have the qualifier, which is now the first week of the major, the new challengers stage, many great teams in different points in history have failed that spot, who were top 10 ranked teams in the world and won tournaments. NIP for E-League, Atlanta major being a great example. So teams wouldn't want to take that risk. It's the biggest tournament of the year. It's the one with the sticker money. A lot of teams might then have to offset what they'd make from the sticker money in terms of what they'd lose on this deal. What people don't consider, though, is that in protecting the players and stopping the orgs abusing everyone, they open it up for the players to abuse everyone. And this actually happened in history. After ESL 1 Cologne 2016, famously, the Fnatic lineup, which was finishing top 4 at all the events, went back home, went to E-League and lost the final to Virtus.Pro. For whatever reason, they decided, fuck it, that's it, we're going to split the team up. And so Krims, JW and Flusher, 3 of the starting 5 members who finished top 4 at ESL 1 Cologne, therefore earning a legend spot, went over to rival Swedish organisation Godsent, where their old in-game leader, Pronax, who won the majors back in 2015 and 2013, was playing. And they went and joined his team, and as a result, Godsent initially took ownership with their players, these 3 players, of the major spot for the next major. Fnatic lost the major, and Fnatic was going to have to play at the EU minor. Now, because they lost their spot entirely and would have to qualify all over again. But you know what? There was a twist yet to be found in this story. Krims, one of the 3 members who'd gone to Godsent for Fnatic, before the next major, went back to Fnatic, and suddenly Fnatic had the major spot again, because they still had Olofmeister and Dennis. So now they had 3 out of the 5 players. The spot went back to them, despite nothing having taken place in the major cycle in between. Now Godsent lost the spot. So, think about this. Krims rejoined Fnatic on October 24th. Now, the EU minor, which either Fnatic would have had to play in or Godsent, took place on November the 4th, 11 days after Krims rejoined Fnatic. Now, imagine Krims decided to hold them hostage. It could just be 1 player. And he went to Godsent. He said, you know what? I've got an offer from Fnatic. I'm not liking my time at Godsent. We've had all these poor placings. If I go to Fnatic, they'll have 3 out of the 5 and they'll have the major spot. They'll get the sticker money. You'll have to go through the minor. Therefore, you know what? I'll stay, but only on condition that I get a specific bribe. I get a specific bonus. I get my contract renegotiated. Or you know what? If you don't do that, I'll leave days before the minor. And all of a sudden, last minute, you'll have to book all your tickets, go to the minor, play at the minor and try and qualify that way. Meanwhile, Fnatic, you know what? I'll make them pay me even more money to sign days before the minor, so they don't have to play the minor. So they're already in the major. They already get their sticker money. And remember, sticker money is an X amount of money. We know roughly how much it is. So now I can really make that like part of my bribe when I'm doing it. You could imagine it hasn't happened in terms of actual abuse. This did not happen with Krims and the Godsent players, but it could have is the point. And this is wide open. And in the future could also be the case. So what I would like to do to change the ownership, to make it fair, is this. I want to change the ownership so it's partly the organisation and it's partly the players, the core amount of players who own the spot. And since both of them own it, I think that will make it fairer to each party and it will promote and incentivize them working together. So this is how I would do it. There would be 2 conditions that would have to be met for the ownership spot to exist in the first place. So after you've gotten the top 8, then between now and the next major, the players have to either stay in the org, 3 out of the 5, or the spot has to be explicitly sold in a contract by the org with 3 of the players to another org. Therefore, the org makes something from it. There's a benefit there. Players can't just leave when they're still under contract or refuse to play, make themselves get bought out like the Immortals players were going to go to 100 Thieves and play for that org when this org still has you under contract. And in theory, they've earned that next spot. They've put in the money behind you, right? Here's the thing, though. If the contracts do end for the players after the major they qualified from and before the major they've qualified to, then I would say that the spot by default goes with the players to whatever org they sign with then, so that then their original org can't bully them over, you got to re-sign with us because otherwise we'll make the spot not exist. That can't happen at that point in time. But the other condition is on the org, which is the org has ownership of this spot, but must use 3 out of the 5 players from the lineup that earned that spot, else the org loses the spot themselves, and that prevents the org from bullying the players, and the players can't bully the org either. If either party doesn't uphold their end, then what happens is the spot simply ceases to exist. That is 1 less legend spot, which, by the way, has happened in the past when some teams broke up and we didn't have qualification spots, not legend spot necessarily. And what should happen then, in my opinion, is when it disappears, whatever region that team was from who gave it up, their regional minor then just gets an extra qualification spot. So obviously it's Europe is the most likely for this to happen, and an extra spot appears there, just as when Envious was in the major but then failed to do anything, They ended up giving up their spot, and for PGL Krakow, an extra spot was created in the EU minor, which funnily enough, Envious just missed out on and didn't get to that major. So I think this would be a fairer approach because it incentivizes working together, it removes both obvious examples of abuse, and even though I don't actually personally like legend spots, it creates somewhat of a fairer landscape for them existing in the first place. This video was kindly supported by Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Andreas Snazore Westerlund, Alex Adams, Eddie Wingfors, Daniel Yordanov, Robert Baxter, Travis Greb, Kyla Harris, James Harding, Caesar, and special thanks go out to Matt Shakowski and Jerky's Minion in particular. Want teasers for my upcoming content? How about asking me a question for my monthly AMA? Do you want to take part in a discussion about esports with me? How about suggesting a topic or a guest for my content? Put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today.